You may be seated. State, you may call your next witness. Ms. Snyder, if you could please come forward, raise your right hand, be ready to be sworn.
You solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the complete truth, so help you God.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Can you please introduce yourself to the jury and spell your first and last name for the record?
Christine Snyder, CHRISTINE,
And Ms. Snyder, how are you employed?
I am the crime scene supervisor at the Seminole County Sheriff's Office.
How long have you been employed with the Seminole County Sheriff's Office?
I've been employed in the crime scene unit since August of 2003, so for almost 16 years.
Do you have any prior analyst experience?
Yes, I previously worked at the Florida Department of Law Enforcement in Jacksonville as a crime laboratory analyst doing shoe and tire examinations. That was for approximately 1 year. Prior to that, I worked at the Virginia Division of Forensic Science as a forensic scientist doing shoe and tire examinations. And prior to that, I was in a training program where I was a fellowship with the Virginia Institute of Forensic Science and Medicine. And I worked at the Virginia Division of Forensic Science where I was trained to do shoe and tire comparisons. And prior to that, I worked at the Virginia Division of Forensic Science in the DNA database area, and also worked part-time as a death investigator with the Chief Medical Examiner's Office.
What are your duties as an analyst with the Seminole County Sheriff's Office at this time?
I supervise the crime scene unit. We have 4 crime scene analysts. I do the daily administrative functions of a supervisor, doing timesheets, reviewing reports, and things like that. I also respond to crime scenes to collect, document, and preserve physical evidence. I also process evidence in the laboratory for latent fingerprints and swab items for DNA. I also enter cartridge cases into NIBIN, and I analyze evidence for footwear impressions.
You stated NIBIN. Can you please explain what that is to the jury?
NIBIN is the National Integrated Ballistics Information Network. It's a database of cartridge cases that searches cartridge cases from crime scenes and test-fired cartridge cases from known firearms in the database to see if they link with any other cartridge cases.
Now, what type of training and education did you receive in order to become a crime scene supervisor with the Seminole County Sheriff's Office?
I have a bachelor's and a master's degree in biology from Virginia Commonwealth University. I also have a PhD in interdisciplinary ecology with a concentration in anthropology from the University of Florida. I completed approximately 6 months of on-the-job training when I was first hired as a crime scene analyst at the Sheriff's Office. I have also completed approximately 2,000 hours of additional external training in forensics. And I am a certified senior crime scene analyst with the International Association for Identification.
Have you had continued training while employed with the Seminole County Sheriff's Office?
Yes, the additional 2,000 hours of forensic training that I've had. In addition to that, I have to recertify as a senior crime scene analyst every 5 years, and there are required number of continuing education credits that you must get in order to maintain that certification.
Now, Ms. Snyder, throughout your career, have you had the opportunity to investigate homicide cases?
Yes,
How many times would you say?
over 60 times.
Of those homicide cases, how many involved gunshot wounds?
Over 45.
Throughout your career, have you had the occasion to investigate suicide scenes involving gunshots?
Yes.
How many times?
Over 55 times.
How many shooting with injury scenes have you investigated throughout your career?
Over 30.
How many total scenes throughout your career have you investigated that involved firearms?
At least over 120, and that's not counting scenes that had firearms present that were not involved in the crime.
Now, do you have any training involving firearms?
Yes, I've completed approximately 55 hours of external training in firearms. I've also completed firearms safety training. I completed 1 week of training with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement in order to do the NIBIN entry. I completed training with the vendor who maintains the NIBIN database in order to gain access to that database. I also have a concealed weapons permit, own guns, and have experience with shooting guns and test firing guns for NIBIN entry.
So you have both personal and professional experience with firearms.
Yes.
Now, throughout your career, have you had the occasion to observe the effects of what would be considered blood pooling in cases?
Yes.
How many times?
I'd say over 120, over 130 times. Definitely approximately 50 or more scenes, homicide scenes where there has been some type of blood pooling, and approximately 130 or so with just blood pooling in general.
Based on your training and experience, can you describe what it means for blood to pool to the jury?
Yes, it's an accumulation of blood onto a surface due to gravity.
As a crime scene supervisor, do you have any training and experience involving footwear impressions?
Yes.
Have you received any certifications in regards to footwear impressions?
Yes, I'm a certified footwear examiner with the International Association for Identification.
Throughout your career, how many footwear cases have you examined?
Approximately 200 cases in the work environment and many, many more in training situations.
How many shoes have you examined?
I'd say thousands.
How many times have you testified regarding impression evidence?
I've testified 8 times in court and 13 times in depositions and 1 time in a grand jury.
I want to draw your attention to the date of January 25th of 2019. Were you working on that date?
Yes.
Were you asked to respond to the location of 2112 Sultan Circle in Chulliota, Florida?
Yes.
Is that location in Seminole County, Florida?
Yes.
What did you respond in reference to?
I was notified by crime scene analyst Rubart that we had a scene involving 3 victims of gunshot wounds.
Approximately what time did you respond to that location?
I arrived at approximately 11:40 a.m.
Once you arrived on scene, did you meet with anyone?
Yes, I met with crime scene analyst Rubart. I also met with investigator Danny Anderson and many other members of the Seminole County Sheriff's Office.
Did you receive a briefing on what was occurring or what had occurred at 2112 Sultan Circle?
Yes.
After the briefing, did you begin an investigation of the home?
We were initially informed that we would be getting a search warrant for the house, so we waited for the search warrant to be signed before we started processing the scene.
And did you receive that search warrant?
Yes.
Approximately what time did you begin to process the scene?
It was about 2 p.m.
Did you process the scene with anyone?
Yes, I assisted crime scene analyst Rubart.
You stated previously you're a supervisor. Are you a supervisor of Arthur Rubart?
Yes.
When you began your investigation, where did you enter the home?
We entered through the back door into the master bathroom.
Permission to approach Madam Clerk.
You may.
Showing council what's been marked for identification as 6-0. Ms. Snyder, I'm going to show you what's in evidence as states 19. And Ms. Snyder, for the record, did you create this diagram?
Yes.
And there should be a laser pointer in front of you. Can you please indicate where you entered the home?
We entered through the back door, which is in this corner of the master bathroom.
And after entering the home from the master bathroom, did you go into the master bedroom?
Yes.
When you walked into the master bedroom, did you observe any electronics?
Yes.
Permission to approach the witness.
You may.
I'm showing the witness what's been pre-marked for identification as state 6-0. Do you recognize this exhibit?
Yes.
How do you recognize it?
By the unique case number, the seal, my initials, actually the seal, and the information written on the outside of the package.
And what is in this package?
This is an Apple iPhone from the chair in the master bedroom.
Did you collect this iPhone from the chair in the master bedroom?
Yes.
What did you do with it after you collected it?
I turned it over to digital forensics for analysis.
Thank you. Ms. Snyder, I'm showing you states 118 in evidence. Is this the same phone that you collected and identified as 6-0?
Yes.
Showing you a closer photograph, states 127. Is this a closer photograph of the same phone?
Yes.
When you collected this phone for evidence, did you clean the phone in any way?
No.
Did you wipe the front of the screen or clean the front of the screen in any way?
No.
Did you submit the phone to digital forensics as you found it?
Yes.
Now, Ms. Snyder, did you and Mr. Rubart begin an investigation into the office depicted in states 19?
Yes.
Showing council what's been pre-marked for identification as states 5-3, or 5C through 5M as in Mary. Permission to approach the witness.
You may.
Showing the witness what's been pre-marked as 5C through 5M. Do you recognize these exhibits?
Yes.
What are the exhibits of?
These are photographs of the office.
And are they a fair and accurate depiction of your investigation that you conducted at 2112 Solon Circle?
Yes.
Permission to move states 5-3, 5C through 5M into evidence as states next.
No objection to
Then what's been pre-marked as State's Exhibit 5M will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit, are we 138? Be 138, what's the, 136, okay, thank you. What's been pre-marked for ID as State's Exhibit 5C will be moved into evidence as 136. What's been,
That's 5D, Your Honor?
5C.
5C.
What's been pre-marked as for ID as State's Exhibit 5D will be moved into evidence as 137 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID as State's Exhibit as 5E will be moved into evidence as 138 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID as State's Exhibit 5F will be moved into evidence as 139 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID as 5G will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 140 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID as 5H will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 141 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID as State's Exhibit 5I will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 142 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID as State's Exhibit 5J will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 143 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID as State's Exhibit 5K will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 144 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID as State's Exhibit 5L will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 145 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID as State's Exhibit 5M as a Mary will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 146 in evidence.
Ms. Snyder, as part of your duties as a crime scene analyst, do you document the path of suspected bullets?
Yes.
How do you do this?
We use what's called trajectory rods, and we place the rods through 2 bullet holes, which then gives an angle and shows the approximate path of a bullet.
What is laser trajectory?
Lasers are used to extend the trajectory rods. In this case, we placed a laser on the end of the trajectory rods so that we could show the laser going through the room to show an approximate location of the path of the bullet.
Do you use laser trajectory to help aid in your investigation of a case?
Yes.
Showing you what's in evidence as states 136. What is this a picture of?
This is a photograph of a bullet hole.
And was the bullet or projectile from or did you locate a projectile or bullet from what's been marked as A?
Yes, once we open up the wall, it went through a 2x4 inside the wall and was located at the base inside the wall to the left of that photograph.
Now showing you states 137. Can you please describe this photograph?
The pink rod is the trajectory rod that we used, and it's been placed through the bullet hole in the drywall and into the bullet hole inside the 2x4 inside the wall. You have to have 2 holes in order to get the angle. And this is a photograph showing the angle of the approximate path of the bullet looking down. And you can see a piece has been broken off of this phone receiver here, which it lines up with, indicating that the bullet broke that piece off also.
If the bullet did not go through the wall behind this wall, would you have been able to conduct a trajectory?
If we only had 1 hole, we would not be able to place the rod through and get an angle.
showing you states 138. What is this a photograph of?
This is a different view of the trajectory rod. It's showing the angle of the approximate path of the bullet through the room. It's showing that it goes over top of the desk where Margaret was found.
Now showing you states 139. What is this a photograph of?
This is another view of the trajectory rod, the same one. Just showing again the approximate path of the bullet across the desk in the office.
Now showing you states 140. Can you please describe this photograph?
This is another view of the same trajectory rod. Again, you can see the partial bullet hole in the phone receiver and the angle of the approximate path of the bullet across the office desk.
I'm showing you states 141. What is this a photograph of?
This is another view of the same trajectory rod, just showing a different viewpoint of the angle.
And you stated you use lasers to help in documenting a suspected path of a projectile. Did you do that in this case?
Yes.
Now showing you states 142 in evidence. Can you please describe this photograph?
This is more of an overall view of the office, and you can see the red line in the photograph. This is the laser, which is attached to the trajectory rod and shining across the room, showing a suspected path of the bullet.
And again, going back to states 140, is this the rod that you attached the laser to?
Yes.
How were you able to take this photograph of the laser?
It's a certain photography technique that we use. In this case, it was darker outside because it was raining, so we did it during the daytime. We placed the camera on a tripod and use an extended shutter speed. And we use what's called photo fog, and it's a can of fog that you spray into the room, which then allows the laser to be seen. And the camera, because it has the longer shutter speed, it captures the light of the laser.
Again, if we zoom up, can we see what's been marked as A for the projectile in this photograph?
Yes, you can see it on the far left here in the photograph.
Now showing you states 143. Can you please describe this photograph?
This is another view of the laser trajectory going through the office. You can see a different angle of it where it goes over the chair and over the desk in the office.
Now, when you use these laser trajectories, does this help you document the path of a suspected bullet?
Yes.
So is it fair to say that the barrel of a gun could be anywhere along this path?
Yes.
Showing you states 144 in evidence. Can you please describe this photograph?
This is another view of the laser trajectory, showing it crossing over the chair in the office and across the desk in the office.
I'm now showing you states 145 in evidence. Can you please describe what is happening in this photograph?
We placed a tape measure vertical right next to the corner of the desk to show the height that the laser was at that point in the room. And this is an overall photograph of that to show where the laser's hitting on a vertical plane in that location.
So I'm going to zoom in. Can you please indicate where specifically the laser is hitting? It's kind of hard to tell with this light.
It's hard to see in this photograph, but it's hitting right at 62 inches.
And this is again using the same path that you've depicted in 144.
Yes, the laser was not moved.
Showing you states 146 in evidence. Is this a closer view of what you described in states 145?
Yes, it's a closer picture of the tape measure with the laser hitting at about 62 inches.
And 62 inches, can you please tell the jury about how many feet that is?
5'2".
And again, the path using the laser trajectory would that indicate how tall the person is holding the gun or where the gun was being held?
It would show the approximate location of where the gun was when it was fired.
Did you locate any cell phones in the office?
Yes,
To your knowledge, how many cell phones were located?
there were 2 that I collected.
And what did you do with the phones that you collected?
They were turned over to digital forensics for analysis.
In the office.
Yes,
I'm showing you states 29 in evidence. Did you collect this phone?
yes,
And to your knowledge, was this phone able to be analyzed?
I believe so.
Was this phone affected, to your knowledge, by the blood that it was sitting in?
I don't recall.
I want to draw your attention to the kitchen, showing you again states 19. You previously described laser trajectory. Did you attempt to do that in the kitchen area of the home?
Yes,
Showing you, I'm sorry. Showing council what's been marked as states 5N through 5X and 13Q.
Is it actually 5N through 5Q and then 5U through 5X and 13Q?
5N, 5O, 5P, 5Q,
5U?
5U,
Okay.
5V, W, and X, and 13Q.
Just making sure it wasn't all consecutive. There is a gap there. The way it was originally stated, it didn't appear that way.
Permission to approach the witness.
Yes, you may.
Showing the witness what's been pre-marked as states 5N through 5X and 13Q. Do you recognize these exhibits?
Yes.
How do you recognize them?
These are photographs of the kitchen and a photograph of Chad's pants.
And are these photographs fair and accurate of your investigation at 2112 Sultan Circle?
Yes.
Permission to move states 5N through 5X and 13Q into evidence.
All right, it was pre-marked for ID as State's Exhibit 5N will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 147 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID as State's Exhibit 5O will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 148 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID as 5P will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 149 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID as State's Exhibit 5Q will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 150 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID as State's Exhibit 5U will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 151 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID as State's Exhibit 5V will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 152 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID as State's Exhibit 5W will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 153 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID as State's Exhibit 5X will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 154 in evidence. And what's been pre-marked for ID as State's Exhibit 13Q will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 155 in evidence.
Permission to publish. I'm showing you what's now in evidence. It states 147. Can you please describe this photograph? This is showing. Now again, going back to 61. Were you able to conduct a laser trajectory for this particular location?
No.
Why not?
Because the first point of impact onto a hard surface was a graze mark, the number 5, and it did not have 2 holes, so it did not have an entry, an exit, or an entry and a re-entry point in order to put the trajectory rod through.
I'm showing you now states 151. Can you please describe this photograph?
This is an overall photograph of the kitchen, which shows the location of the impact mark on the tile labeled as number 5 and the hole at the bottom of the kitchen island labeled as number 6. And you can also kind of see the holes in the top portion of the cabinet and the wall labeled as B and C that we saw previously.
And was this photograph taken after you started to scrape the kitchen floor?
Yes.
Can you please indicate, if you can, with your laser pointer, where Chad was located in relation to the marker 5 on the ground?
He was approximately in this location. This area here was visible after we removed the body. So his head was where my laser is pointing in that area, and his legs were towards the right.
Now showing you states 150. Can you please describe what we are looking at in this photograph?
This is showing the kitchen floor where Chad's body had been located, and you can see the number 5 graze mark on the tile floor. And again, that blood that we saw in the previous picture is where his body had been located prior to being removed.
And for comparison, I'm going to show you states 41 in evidence. Does this give you an idea of where he was located in relation to rear marker 5 in states 150?
Yes.
Now showing you what's in evidence as states 154. Can you please describe this photograph?
This is a photograph of the kitchen floor showing the blood in the room. I've marked several areas which appear to be palm prints in blood. The 1, 2, 3, and 4.
For the record, I'm zooming it in. Start with 1. 1 and 2. Can you please describe what led you to believe these were indications of palm prints?
Just overall, you can see the shape of the blood print, where it's a little bit longer on the right and more circular on the left. If you've ever put paint on your hands or black powder or ink and you press it onto a surface, you'll see a similar pattern come from that. So that was the first indication that these may be palm prints. And once you got closer to them, you could see a small amount of ridge detail, which is present on the palms of the hands.
And did you notice the same things where you marked 2, 3, and 4?
Yes, and in number 2 and 3, you can actually see some smearing, which appear to be finger marks.
Now, when you first entered the kitchen on January 25th of 2019, did you make any initial observations of Chad Amato's body?
Yes, when I first saw Chad's body in the kitchen, I asked the investigators if he had been moved. It was my instinct that he was not in the correct position or in the position that he had died in. Based on my training and experience, his taking in the entire crime scene, the blood patterns, the movement in the blood in the kitchen, it seemed that he was not in the same positioning as he would have been at the time he died.
And I'm going to show you again states 41. Can you please point out to the jury what specifically led you to believe he was moved?
Well, initially, when we arrived at the scene, we knew that there were 2 cartridge cases in the kitchen. However, we only saw the 1 bullet hole in the top portion of the kitchen cabinet. And that lined up with the blood pool on this side of the kitchen island, so the right side in this photograph. So we assumed, or I assumed, that that shot caused him to fall down. He bled. And then you can see these drops of blood. Everybody's cut themselves and dripped blood. And some movement in the blood. And these palm prints. So it appeared that he was face down and possibly crawling around the kitchen floor. And then he ended up on this side where he bled more and died. So if somebody's crawling around and they just bleed out and die, you would assume that they would be face down.
And did you make any observations of where the blood pool is in relation to Chad Amato?
Well, there was a significant amount of blood under his head, but also to the right of his head, which once we cleaned off the blood, we could see that the impact of the bullet was not directly under his head. It was over a couple tiles to the right of his body. The blood pooling could have moved because the kitchen floor wasn't level, so it could have drained down. But we did notice that it was spread out a little bit around his head.
And again, going back to 150, States 150, you were able to see this bullet mark later and noticed it was in a different location in the body.
Yes, and that was after the autopsy.
And do you know if the floor was level or was not level?
We didn't check for that.
Okay. So you can't say one way or another?
I can't.
Ms. Snyder, after the autopsy was performed and after finding this marker in States 150, what you marked as 5, did this lead you to any conclusions as to whether or not Chad Amato was flipped over?
Yes, the autopsy revealed that he had been shot in the back of the head, which exited the forehead, and so he would have been face down at the time of that shot.
Now, you stated you have experience in firearms, both personally and professionally.
Yes.
Did you make any observations, and I will show you what's in evidence in States 54, as to the positioning of the holster and firearm on Chad's hip?
Yes.
Did this appear to be unusual to you?
Yes, it did.
And permission to approach, Madam Clerk? For demonstrative purposes, I'm going to show counsel what's been marked for identification as States 14M. Permission to approach the witness? I'm showing the witness what's been marked as States 14M for demonstrative purposes. For the record, 14M is a blue toy fake gun. Now, Ms. Snyder, can you please, would it help you to use 14M to demonstrate to the jury why you specifically found the positioning of the holster and firearm on Chad's hip unusual?
Yes.
And permission to allow the witness to demonstrate for the jury.
She may do so.
If you could please stand up and demonstrate.
The firearm was inside of a holster, which you can see on the screen. The holster had a metal clip which attached it to the belt. However, it was placed between the pants and the belt, which would make it unstable. The metal clip was on the outside across the belt, and the holster was inside of the belt between the pants and the belt. The gun itself was placed inside of the holster, and it was in this position on his body, which was strange because we learned from his son Jason that he was right-handed. So if you're holding or if you're carrying a firearm and you want to draw it quickly, you're going to grab it here. And in this case, the grip isn't in the right location. So if somebody was carrying the firearm in this manner, they would most likely be left-handed, and they would have to do a cross draw, where they pull it out this way. This is not a very common way to carry a firearm because it's a little bit harder to get to. It takes longer to pull it out. And I've heard of people who are left-handed who shoot right-handed, but it's very not as common for a right-handed person to shoot with their left hand. So normally, if you're carrying a firearm, you would probably put it inside of your pants for stability, especially a large gun like this, and he's a smaller individual. And you would have the grip towards the side, so then you can grab it quickly and pull it out. If you were carrying it the way that he has it, and you're right-handed, you would have to pull it out awkwardly, point it at yourself, and then point it towards somebody to fire it, which just doesn't make any sense. If you were right-handed and you were doing a cross draw, you would carry it on the other side and pull it out this way. But the only way that this is strange for a right-handed person to carry it this way.
So when you observed Chad Amato, you did find this to be unusual based off of the information you learned later?
Yes.
Now, did you also have the opportunity to examine or observe the holster that was on Chad Amato's hip?
Yes.
Did you observe any visible blood on the holster?
No, it appeared clean without any visible blood.
Did you have an opportunity to observe the pants that Chad was wearing?
Yes.
Did you have an opportunity to examine the pants after the holster had been removed?
Yes.
Did you make any observations of the pants after the holster was removed?
Yes.
Okay, one moment, Your Honor. First, I'll start by showing you what's in evidence as states 53. And then I'm now going to show you what's now in evidence as states 155. What observations did you make after you were able to compare the pants when the holster had been removed versus the pants when the holster was still on the hip?
I observed an area of suspected blood on the coin pocket edge, which would have been covered or was covered by the holster at the crime scene.
I'm again going to refer back to 153. Do you see the same coin pocket?
Yes, you can see it. One edge of it, one side of it, underneath the gun holster.
Was there anything unusual about this to you?
Yes, it was strange to see suspected blood underneath the holster in this case.
Can you please indicate why you believed it to be strange?
Due to the amount of blood on his pants and observing the movement in the blood, he was crawling around, face down, crawling through the blood in the kitchen. You would expect to see the suspected blood on the holster, not on the pants underneath the holster.
I want to ask you stated you have extensive experience with shoe print analysis.
Yes,
Did you conduct any tests in the kitchen to determine if there were footwear impressions?
yes.
How do you test for footwear impressions in blood?
In this case, I used a chemical called leucocrystal violet. It reacts with the hemoglobin in the blood and turns it a purple color. And in this case, I sprayed leucocrystal violet on the kitchen floor, including those areas of palm prints, and attempted to develop any latent shoe prints in suspected blood.
Can you please explain how the chemical enhances the presence of blood?
Yes, it is a catalytic reaction with the hemoglobin in the blood, and a positive reaction will result in a purple color.
Did you conduct that test in this case?
Yes.
I'm going to show you what's in evidence as states 153. Can you please indicate to the jury where you conducted the test to look for footwear impressions?
Yes, I started in the area of suspected blood and worked my way back towards the hallway into the gym.
Did any shoe prints develop in the suspected blood?
No, they did not.
Did you expect to find any shoe prints in the blood on the kitchen floor?
I did not see any visible shoe prints in suspected blood or any shoe prints in the visible blood that we already talked about. So I did not really expect to find any, however, I tried.
Now I want to show you the gym. Did you conduct an investigation and going to states 19? Did you conduct an investigation in the gym?
Yes.
I'm showing counsel what's been marked for identification as states 5Y through 6M. Permission to approach the witness. Showing the witness what's been marked as states 5Y through 6M as in Mary. Do you recognize these exhibits?
Yes,
How do you recognize them?
they are photographs of the gym.
And are they a fair and accurate depiction of the investigation you conducted at 2112 Sultan Circle?
Yes,
Permission to move states 5Y through 6M into evidence as states next.
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, what's been pre-marked for ID is State's Exhibit 5Y will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 156 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID is State's Exhibit 5Z will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 157 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID is 6A will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 158 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID is State's Exhibit 6B will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 159 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID is State's Exhibit 6C will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 160 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID is State's Exhibit 6D will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 161 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID is State's Exhibit 6E will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 162 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID is State's Exhibit 6F will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 163 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID is State's Exhibit 6G will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 164 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID is State's Exhibit 6H will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 165 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID is State's Exhibit 6I will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 166 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID is State's Exhibit 6J will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 167 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID is State's Exhibit 6K will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 168 in evidence. What's been pre-marked for ID is State's Exhibit 6L will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 169 in evidence. And what's been pre-marked for ID is State's Exhibit 6M as Mary will be moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 170 in evidence.
Permission to publish?
Showing the witness what's been moved into evidence now is states 156. Can you please describe this photograph?
this is a photograph showing the inside of the door that leads from the gym into the garage. So we're standing inside of the gym, and the other side of the door is the garage. D and E are marking, D is marking a graze mark from a bullet, and E is marking a bullet hole into the wall.
And was a projectile or bullet located in the wall where E is marked?
Yes.
Now showing you states 157. Is this a closer image of what you described in states 156?
Yes, so you can see that D is a graze mark, and E is a hole into the wall.
And looking at this photograph, can you make any observations of the door frame next to marker D?
There are some red areas and yellowish colored areas, which are areas of suspected blood or suspected tissue.
And when you began your investigation, did you learn that law enforcement opened the door that led from, going back to states 19, that led from the garage into the gym?
Yes, when they arrived, that door was closed, and when I arrived, it was open.
Now showing you states 158. Did you make observations in this photograph?
Yes, you can see some additional areas of suspected blood and tissue, which are on the interior edge of the door and on the interior edge of the door frame, in the area where, if the door is closed, that would not be visible.
Were you expecting to find blood or tissue within this door frame?
If the door had been closed at the time of the shooting, then we would not expect to see it. If it had been open, then it would be normal to see it there.
Now showing you states 149. We now have markers 3 and 4. Can you please indicate what those markers were for?
3 and 4 are showing areas of suspected blood and suspected tissue on that interior edge of the door and on the interior edge of the door frame that again would not be visible if the door was closed.
And you also now have a ruler in this photograph. What was the ruler for?
It was to help locate the items vertically on the door frame.
I'm now showing you a closer view of what you previously marked in 159 as marker number 3.
This is a closer photograph showing the suspected blood and suspected tissue. The circle is just part of the door, but the red and the yellow are suspected blood and tissue.
And would this blood or tissue have gotten on this part of the door if the door was closed?
No.
That was 160 for the record.
Yes, for the record, this is 160. Going back to 159, where we see marker 4, I'm going to show you 161. Is this a closer view of what we looked at in 149?
Yes, this is
Or
a closer
159.
view showing the suspected blood and suspected tissue on the inside of the door frame.
And again, would this blood and tissue have been there had the door been closed?
No.
Now I want to draw your attention to the bottom of the door frame. Showing you 162. Can you please describe this photograph?
This is showing the bottom portion of the door, the threshold, that piece of metal that's on the floor. The top portion is inside the gym, and the bottom portion is outside. The tan is the garage door or garage floor, and you can see that there is suspected blood spatter all along you can see it inside the garage and all along the threshold on both sides, inside and outside. And again, the outside portion would have been blocked had the door been closed at the time of the shooting.
I'm showing you what's now in evidence as 164. Can you please describe this photograph?
This is a similar photograph as before, however it's flipped upside down, so the top portion is in the garage, bottom portion is in the gym. You can see the pool of blood inside on the carpet, which continues onto the threshold. You can see the blood spatter on the threshold itself. And blood spatter means that it has some type of directionality to it. So there's little tails or some type of force that goes along with that. And you can see the suspected blood on the concrete inside the garage also.
So spots of blood are also visible into the garage.
Yes.
And for the record, can you, using your laser pointer, point out the specific areas of blood you see in the garage?
There's a larger area here, and you can see some smaller particles, which appear to be the same color and texture as the other blood. There is a larger area of blood over to the left, and that appears to have seeped under the threshold and into the garage.
So what you indicate up here as blood that seeped through the door, and this area you indicated where my pen is pointing, is that blood that would have seeped through?
No, that would be considered blood spatter.
So two different forms of how the blood was visible.
Yes.
I'm now showing you what's in evidence as states 163. Can you please describe this photograph?
This is an area of blood that has saturated into the carpet on the inside of the doorway into the gym from the garage. There's also some blood spatter on the corner of the wall. If you remember from photographs before, this area is where Cody's feet were located before he was moved.
Did you have an opportunity to compare the floor from when Cody was on the floor versus when he was not?
Yes.
So I'm going to show you what's in evidence as state 72, showing the same door frame. Was anything about the positioning of where the blood pool was located versus Cody's head that you found to be unusual?
Yes. His injury was to the face under the right eye and exited the back of the left side of his head. And that was the only substantial injury that would have bled at the time. There were no injuries to his feet or lower legs, which would have created that amount of blood down by his feet.
This is after showing you states 163. You previously discussed blood pooling. Is this blood in 163 what you would describe as a blood pool?
Yes, it's a blood pool onto a porous surface, so it's saturated into the carpet.
I'm now showing you states 165 in evidence. What is this a photograph of?
This is a photograph of the door frame, interior door frame. Previously, number 3 and 4 were on the right side. If you're looking out into the garage, this is on the left side, down towards the bottom, so you can actually see the metal threshold with the blood. And number 1 is an example of what we call blood spatter. It has a tail to it, which indicates directionality. And you can see that it's located on the portion of the door frame that would have been covered had the door been closed at the time that blood was placed there.
with marker 1 would be different than a blood pool
Yes.
and the blood pool that you described previously on the ground.
Yes.
Now showing you states 166, what is this photograph of?
This is another photograph of the door threshold like we saw before. You can see all of the areas of suspected blood that were inside of the garage area and on the inside of the threshold, which again would have been covered had the door been closed.
And you previously were describing marker 1. Was that somewhere over here where I'm pointing with my pen and we see the yellow ruler?
Yes.
And this is the blood pool that you previously described in the bottom right-hand corner.
Yes.
I'm now showing you states 167, which is a further away view you described in 166. Can you please indicate what we are looking at in this photograph?
This is looking down onto the door threshold. You can see the marker number 1 is right at the bottom there. Again, you can see the pool of blood on the carpet and on the threshold, which then appeared to seep out underneath it into the garage. You can see some blood spatter on the corner of the wall over top of the blood pool.
Did you use rulers on that blood splatter to kind of mark it?
Yes.
And in the same photograph, we now have marker 2. What is marker 2?
That's just another area that was marked to do a close-up photograph of the blood spatter on the threshold.
And you use rulers on all sides of the door?
Yes.
I'm now showing you states 168. Is this marker 2 you previously indicated in states 167?
Yes.
And using your laser pointer, can you please identify the specific areas of suspected blood that you located?
Yes, so we can see some on the inside of the door threshold here at the bottom. And then we see some with tails, which indicate directionality, next to the number 2 scale. And again, that's on the garage side of the threshold, which would have been covered if the door had been closed. And there's also additional blood on the inside of the garage on the floor.
Now, you previously used the term directionality. Does this blood spatter have a direction to it?
It does, but I'm not a bloodstain expert.
Okay. And can you please, using your laser pointer, just indicate where exactly the gym is located and where the garage would be located?
The gym is towards the bottom of the photograph, and the garage is towards the top.
If the door had been closed, would you have expected to find blood spatter by marker 2?
No.
Now showing you states 169 in evidence. What is this a photograph of?
This is a photograph of suspected, or of blood spatter on the bottom portion of the wall, just inside the door to the garage.
again, do we see the blood pool at the bottom of this photograph?
Yes.
I'm now showing you states 170 in evidence. What observations did you make in this photograph?
This was after Cody's body had been removed, and you can see a smaller area of blood pooling, which was located under where his head was when we arrived. You can see almost what looks like a trail of blood that goes between where his head was, towards the floor mat, and towards the larger pool of blood that was by his feet.
Again, comparing that with photograph 72, did you find that location of blood to be unusual? Or the location of blood versus the positioning of the body unusual?
Yes, there was the significant amount of blood under his feet, almost a trail between his feet area and his head, a smaller pool of blood under his head where the injuries were. There was some blood on his hand, on the palm, which was not in contact with his head, where it was bleeding. And like we said before, blood pooling will go with gravity, so it's just going to drain down. It's not going to jump onto the hand from the injury. So it appeared that his head had been located where the larger pool of blood was at some point, and then had been moved.
Now again, you indicated the smaller pool of blood. Can you please indicate that smaller pool of blood using your laser pointer?
Yes, the smaller pool was in this area. And again, this was after he was removed, so this blood here had been added as he was being moved by the medical examiner's office. So this area here is under where his head was located at the scene. And then the larger pool of blood was over by where his feet had been located.
Did you make any observations, I'm showing you states 75, of where the blood was located on Cody Amato's face?
Yes, his injury was located directly under his right eye. And you can see it here, it looks almost black. That was the entrance, the gunshot wound entrance. You can see the suspected blood, or the blood, is actually draining down in this area, which is going with gravity, which is what we would expect to see. However, there was a lot of blood above the wound, and almost a line around his face, and then it goes onto his right ear. And in this photograph you can see what looks like an impression of his ear in blood behind his ear, as if his ear had been smashed down at some point. So there was a void area, so similar to the door. If the door was closed at the time the shooting happened, it would block the blood from going behind it. Same thing here. If he is right side down and there's something pressing against his face on the right side, could be anything, his hand, the backpack, the floor, then the blood will drain down and go around it. And that's almost what we see here, is it's draining opposite of gravity and going around whatever was there. So that was not consistent with his body position when we found him.
Did all of these observations you made lead you to believe that Cody Amato had been moved?
Yes.
Now, you previously stated you created diagrams of 2112 Sultan Circle.
Yes.
Did you create a diagram indicating the laser trajectories or of the suspected projectile paths, as well as locations of the cartridge cases and the decedents?
Yes.
I'm showing.
Can you all approach?
Yes.
Afternoon recess. I do also want to say, I know we have a witness from out of town. I can tell you, for instance, our witness yesterday took longer than, and today took longer than planned. So if there's anything that you all have after 5:30, if you could please make arrangements now while we're on a break, just in case we do go a little bit after 5:30 to make sure that that out-of-town witness is taken care of, all right? Okay, thank you.